arrange them within a scene. This time around, let's go ahead and see how we can work with an array. Now, an array allows you to create data types or a single data type multiple times. Basically, if I want, like, say, a list of 5 or 10 game objects, I can do that with an array. Or if I want a list of integers, 10 integers, I can use an array to do that. So let's go ahead and see how we can create an array using C#. So right now, I'm just going to go off the scene and let's just go to our projects folder and let's go to our scripts folder right here. So right here in our scripts folder, let's go ahead and create a new C# script, and I'll just go to create C# script. So I'll just name that array script. And let's go ahead and save that array script. And let's just double click that to open it up in our Visual Studio environment. Right, so now that our script has opened up, let's go ahead and get rid of the update because we won't be using any update. So we can actually go ahead and delete that. So now that I've gotten rid of that, the first thing I like to do is to create a function that will hold a reference to all our little pieces of code. So to do that, I'm just going to create a void. And I'll just say creating an array. That's going to be the name of our function. And voila, just like that. So what we're also going to do is in our start method, we're going to call our creating an array function. So I'll just go ahead and pick that and just paste it right here for our creating an array. And we'll use a column, semicolon to close that. So for our array, the first thing we're going to do is just to start creating an array. So first we need to specify the data type. So it's going to be an int. And to create an array, you're going to use square brackets, opening and closing square brackets. And I'll just initialize the array by using the new keyword constructor and then passing the int and then specifying the number of elements in that array. So right now I have an array and I'm passing that array as this value. But I can also do this by providing the name of this array, right? So I'm just going to call this numbers. And just like that, we actually have an array called numbers, and we've initialized this array to have 5 elements. So also what we can actually do right now is to get the length of this array. So let's go ahead and see how we do that. So arrays have a property. So if I do numbers and I do dot and I just scroll down a bit, I should actually see length. And this is actually a property. It means I need to set a value for this property so that I can reference it. So I'll just create a float called length and assign that to numbers.length. And basically I can just jump to my debug.log and I can say something in the likes of number of elements in the array and here we'll just concatenate that value, so plus length. And what I'll also do is to use a column to end that statement. So let's go ahead and save that and then jump back to Unity and check to see if we can get the number of elements in that array. So I'll just drag our script and we'll place it on the main camera. And I'll just make sure that script here, the array script, is on the main camera. And let's just go ahead and run that array. And what I'm also going to do is to deactivate the nested loop script we have attached to our game object. So let's go ahead and just run that. And let's quickly look at our console, and we can actually see right here it says number of elements in the array 5. So it understands that there are 5 elements in the array. So how does the array work, right? So let's go ahead and just keep on going. So what I'm going to do right now is to set the number of elements in our array. Right now we have 5 arrays, a single array that stores an integer of 5 numbers. Let's go ahead and assign a value to each of those elements in that array. So let's just say assigning values to the elements of the array. So to do that, I'll just simply call the name of the array, and we have our numbers, and then use square brackets. So for the first index, it starts with 0. I'm just going to set a value of 22. And then for the second element, well, let's just do the last one, which is 4. Let's set that value to 50. And to be able to loop through the array, so let's just say a loop through the array. I'm going to use a for each loop. Now, a for each loop will go over any item or object that's iterable. It means simply you can count over. So let's count over the elements in our array using a for each loop. So I'm just going to say for each. And we know that the data is an integer. So I'm just going to say int, and we'll create a variable called num in numbers. So what we're trying to say right now is for each integer num that's in numbers, because we know we have 5 integers in our variable called numbers. So we're creating another variable here to store that count. So what I'm going to do right now is just to print out this on the screen. Now there's a simple function called print, which is similar to debug.log. So if I just say print num, this should print out the elements and loop through the number of elements in this array. If you haven't assigned a value, it will assign a value of 0 to that element. So let's go ahead and see that. So I've saved this, and let's jump back to Unity. Let's clear our screen, and let's go ahead and play our scene. So right now we can see the first element is 22 and the last element is 50. But the second, third, and the first, second, third, and fourth elements are all 0 because we haven't assigned a value to them. So that's how we can actually create an array and initialize a value. We can also create an array, not necessarily of an integer. We can create an array of game objects. In fact, let's go ahead and create a public game object array that will hold a reference of 4 game objects. So just right here in our class, let's say creating a public game object to hold 4 game objects. Right. So what we're going to do right now is just to use the keyword public, and we'll pass in game object, and we'll use our square brackets, and then we'll give it our game object a name. So let's say game underscore obj as a shorthand for game objects equals new. We'll use the new constructor to create an instance of those 4 game objects. So basically that's how we can do this. So let's go ahead and jump back to Unity. Let's save this and jump back to Unity and then play our scene to see what we get. So right now I'm playing my scene. And just right here, if I click this drop down arrow on collapse, you can actually see a game object called game underscore obj. And if I click that drop down menu, you can see we have elements 0, 1, 2, and 3. So I have 4 elements with the first index starting at 0. So what I can do right now is to just go to my game object, and let me just stop that and just go to create empty, create another empty game object, create another one, and let's just create a light. Because why not? So let's create a point light also. So if I go back to my main camera, I can drag in the game objects we created into this slot. So I could just drag in the element 1 for the element 2, and then I'll pass in the point light into element 3. So basically a game object can be anything in Unity because everything is an object. So our assets, our 2D assets, 3D assets, components, they're all part of the game object system. So that's how we can create that and then pass in these values into our game object. And finally, what we created is a 1D array. So I'll just show you how that Unity stores information in that array type object. So let's go ahead and just jump in here. And I'll just open up my favorite image editing environment, and I'll just draw, okay, that's not straight. I'll just draw a line and just draw a simple box like that. So if, for instance, let's just draw some of these cells. We have this array. The first element is going to be 0 to reference that. The second array index is going to be 1. Then we have 2, then we have 3, then we have 4, and then we have 5. So when we created our int array and we called it numbers, right? And then in numbers, we set the first element, which is this one right here, to say 22 by saying numbers, like that. And then we'll pass in the value in our array. So by doing so, we can pass in memory references into our memory, where we can reference our array object, like we've seen in our example right here, where we set the number of elements right here. I think this should be in this form. Sorry guys, it should be in this form. So numbers 0 equals 22, just like that. Like we've seen in our example, that's how we can assign a value to our array. So that's a one-dimensional array because it's just consisting of one dimension. So this is one dimension. If we wanted to have a two-dimensional array, it could actually be in this form. So you can have, say, for instance, an x-axis, and then you can x-axis goes from left to right, and you can have a y-axis that goes from top to bottom. We won't be using arrays much in this course, so I'm actually not going to jump into creating 2D arrays, but just know that they exist. So arrays are not perfect because with an array, each time you create an array, the element of your array is fixed and you cannot change them. Basically, I can go back and I can do something like this. I can go back and say numbers, index equals 44. That's going to give me an error because you cannot change the contents of your array once you've already created an array, which for a game, you don't want that to happen because sometimes in your game you might want to change values. So the best tool to use for creating data types, multiple data types of the same type, is to use a list, which we'll see in our next lesson. Thank you very much guys for watching, and I'll see you then.